Welcome back to All About the Geek, where we are finally going to tackle that paint handle tray video that I promised you so very long ago. Alright, to get started, you're going to need a couple of things. First, some masking tape. You're going to need a straight edge of some sort. I've got a square here. You're going to want something to mark your foam core with, your paint handle, and obviously a glue gun to assemble all of it. To make things easy on yourself, I've built a template, and you'll be able to find a link to this down below. Now finally, you'll need something to cut with. I've got this rotary cutter as well as a regular X-Acto blade. The rotary cutter is nice for doing the circles, but ultimately you can use the blade as well. So we've got our X-Acto blade. Make sure it is good and sharp. I've got a pair of needle nose pliers here for changing the blade, should that be necessary during the process. It's just safer to handle these sorts of things that way. All right, when it comes to measuring this, rather than using any sort of specific dimensions, it's best to use the actual pieces. So use your paint handle to determine how tall your sides need to be. The diagram pretty much matches the Citadel paint handle I've got in the picture here. Let's take a quick tangent here to talk a little bit about the foam core we're using. I really recommend you use the highest possible quality foam core you can get. It is a little bit more expensive, probably coming in around $15 or $20 a sheet. You can use dollar store foam core, however, it's just going to be a little more holy. It also won't hold up to the hot glue quite as well as the good stuff from my experience. Ultimately, you can use masking tape to hold everything together, and you can see from these pieces that that has already been the case. And in fact, this engineering sample, as I call it, was held together for over a year simply with masking tape, and it worked fine. It is a little the worse for wear as a result, but that's fine. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create the long edge first, then we'll do this short edges, and finally we will wrap up with the last long edge. It is also optional if you want to create a base, and that's what we will be doing here. It adds a little more stability, but it isn't required. For this first piece, rather than mark it and then cut, we're just going to line everything up using our square here, which is a benefit over just using a ruler. And then we're going to grab our knife and cut it directly. Now remember, with foam core, it's best to make several light passes. And even though I'm clearly pushing down hard on the foam core itself with my hand holding the ruler, the blade passes are lighter at any rate. Now I find for attaching this first piece, it's really a good idea to use a piece of masking tape as a little bit of a clamp. The rest of the pieces we're going to be able to just leverage the fact that we've got two anchor points already, but for this first one, it's just easiest to take a piece of masking tape, the size you need, lay it down on one piece, and I personally prefer to lay it down on the top, and then once that we've got that tape smoothed out and ready to go, we can just flip the piece over and then put the side in place and then move the tape up to it. And what that's going to do is it's going to create as good a joint as you really need to make sure that when you lay your bead of hot glue down, you can just basically close it like a book, but it's only going to close to that roughly 90-degree state. It's a little tricky with only two hands, but it's totally doable. All right, for assembly, I'm going to assume that you have used a hot glue gun before. We're just going to run a bead along here. If you are a minor, make sure you have parents' assistance in all of the steps here, including the cutting and the hot gluing. Now that the bead is down, we're just going to fold this up, hold it in place for a few seconds, and all right, so now we're going to do the next side. Simply place it up against the first side you installed, measure it along there. In this case, we're not going to cut it in place, we're going to mark it. Just double check that it's the right angle, right height, in case you've got multiple pieces like I do here. We're just going to mark it with a Sharpie, and then we will make sure that line is nice and square and cut away. You can see by cutting in this direction, you can see I'm clearly not putting a lot of pressure on it, and I'm just going to do, you know, 3 or 4 slices, and that'll get it done. Then make sure you test fit the piece and that it's oriented the right way, not just towards the camera. And now we're just going to, again, throw some glue down and press it up against. Now, you'll see throughout this, I'm going to alternate between gluing the piece and gluing on the a final assembly. However you tackle it is your own choice. Both work well. The other thing I found as I was going through this is that it was a good idea to reinforce the joints. So this next bit, what I'm going to do is take the hot glue gun and throw basically what I call a gusset in here, which is an extra wad of hot glue that will just reinforce that joint a little bit more. Doesn't hurt, and I'm going to run it not only along the vertical but along the horizontal there. It just adds some more stability to what is otherwise just a butt joint with a bit of hot glue in there. All right, so the next side, same thing. We're gonna measure in place, mark it, draw a line to make sure that it is straight. Then we're gonna use our knife to just easily give this a quick cut. Now the piece is cut, we're gonna test fit and glue it into place. So you can see here I'm gluing the final product rather than the piece I'm adding, just as an example of the 2 different ways that you can tackle assembling these pieces. And there isn't a one size fits all method. Just do whatever feels right for you. All right, this next piece is just a quick bit of reinforcement here. So we're gonna put one on either side of the center hole. And this is just gonna provide a little bit of reinforcement because the paint handle, as I've got mine set up, is going to actually rest on that top piece. So it doesn't need to go all the way across. This first reinforcement joint that I do will basically cross between the 2 long sides. And you can see I'm adding gussets here as well. The second reinforcement piece that I'll put in later actually isn't going to connect to both sides. Speaking of which, now is to put the final side on. So all we have to do is measure, and just like before, we're going to measure against our actual piece. We're gonna draw a line, we're going to cut the piece, and then finally we're going to pre-fit and then glue it into place. And there we have more or less a ready to go tool. Now we're going to again reinforce a lot of these joints with the interior weld, as I like to think of them. And we also still have to add in that additional gusset that I talked about, or additional reinforcement piece. But it already has some pretty good stability and you can push down on it pretty hard. This is that last reinforcement piece that I talked about. And as you can see, it's tall enough, but it's not long enough to go all the way between the 2 long sidewalls. But that's good enough. I am going to put it against the sidewall I just installed because the other one does touch both sidewalls and this one probably just could use the extra reinforcement. It's not probably strictly better than one option or the other. It's just the way I did it. And here we have testing our paint handle. We can see that it comes up, it doesn't rattle too much, and it works well. Already cut more or less to shape. And so we just need to run glue around the edges and then we can plop it on. We don't really need great exposition here, but while we're watching the glue be laid down, now's a great time to like and subscribe. With our glue bead finished, we can go ahead and drop the base on, and this is more or less our completed paint handle tray. So that is how we put together this. Now, this is kind of the final project, and you can see here, this one is flopping around because this is using the newer paint handle style as opposed to the old paint handle style. So be sure to take the instructions that I gave you and modify them as you need to fit your particular paint handle of preference, whether you're using one of GW's, whether you're using the one that we built in the how to build your own paint handle video, or if you're using some other product. Make the hole just big enough for the base, make it tall enough so it doesn't wobble around, and really that's all you got to do. It's pretty straightforward. I am working on some designs that will fit this one better and the newer ones, as well as an option for building something that holds a whole mess of paint handles, largely because for myself, I've got 10 of these for doing like an entire squad at once. So while a 5-1 is great, having something that can hold 10 or 15 or a variety of the different paint handles I have is another great idea. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. I won't tell you when it's going to happen. I don't want to commit to anything. This one took 2 years from when I said it was going to come to finish and finalize, but I think it was worth the wait. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video. And again, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, remember to work your wonk and keep it geeky. All right, thanks.